Video games was that lot simpler. What time out never did take to worried around voice acting. Myself was live, then prevent myself the appreciate any time for pixels and bit tunes. Nowadays, everything are only too complicated. Few aspects of gaming show how far gaming has come than the quality of voice acting. Clearly other parts like graphics and the ability to squeeze the consumer dry have developed a lot in the many decades that gaming as an industry has been chugging along, but as video games have become more cinematic and more like interactive movie experiences with hugely detailed and intricately choreographed cutscenes, voice actors have started to get their shit together. Kinda sound like real people nowadays. Though as I sit here launching projectiles from inside my glass house, we can't forget that voice acting is hard. Fuck, acting in general is pretty difficult. Trying to get the right level of emotion out of a voice is particularly challenging. Maybe even fruitless with older games since it took a while for the characters' faces to reflect what they were feeling. But that just means that I got loads of hilariously bad material to work with. Weeks like these make me appreciate that I'm a YouTube. There's reluctance with lists like these to include older games since the application of something like voice acting in video games is something that has clearly improved over time but started out shaky. And yeah, you'd expect it to be, but does that mean that I can't point and laugh at it? Nah, I'm all for cutting slack from time to time, but you can only grow in an industry as young as video gaming by looking at older examples and pointing out what could have been done better. So in 1990, when big franchises like Mario and Zelda were just getting started and no one knew hedgehogs could go so fast, King's Quest was already on its 5th game, and developers Sierra Online were getting ambitious. I know very little about games like King's Quest, partly because it was way before my time, but also because I've only started playing games on a computer in the last 7 or so years. I know they've made a lot of them and that they made a game last year, but other than that, not a lot. I know they talk a lot. Maybe that means something. That they do, but importantly, especially for a video like this, King's Quest V was the franchise's first foray into implementing voice acting into a game. It's important to note that before this, voices had been synthesized into video games in the likes of Berserk and Sinistar, and there were even a few games that added more than just a few lines, but King's Quest V went big and it wasn't all good.
Katrina, you know these toys are for sale for other kinder? Besides, you've got plenty of dolls.
Again, the whole early stages in a new industry thing meant that Sierra didn't want to spend money on something that technically anyone can do. Hence why they got their staff to do it. But you gotta look at voice acting in a similar way to playing the drums. Anyone can physically do it, but there's a big difference between someone with no experience and a seasoned pro. The voice acting in King's Quest isn't terrible, and for its time it's probably about right, but you can't help but laugh when you hear the characters react in ways that no sane person would. Especially the owl.
Oh, it was the powerful and evil wizard Mordak who did it.
This is how magical creatures talk, isn't this fantasy game full of so much whimsy and wonderment? A lot of video games can get by without voice acting, or at least without there being a focus on it. Sure, giving a character a voice can make their personality a lot more apparent, but I still think there's a time and place for a silent protagonist. Certainly when handled with care and in moderation. Of course, there are some characters who you can't imagine with a voice. No idea what the Half-Life games would be like if Gordon Freeman said a few words, for example. And nowhere has this felt more than in the Legend of Zelda games. There may come a time in the future when every important character in a Zelda game has a voice to go with their text, but until that point, the debate will rage on over whether or not Zelda needs voice acting. Exhibit A in the argument against. The only time anyone put a voice to every important character in a Zelda game, the train derailed in spectacular fashion. Which almost makes it sound like the only problem with the CDI Zelda games was the voice acting, but don't worry, these games are bad all the way through to the other side, with the voice acting actually serving as potentially the one redeemable feature. Not to call it good, God no, but definitely entertaining in all the wrong ways.
You dare bring light to my lair? You must die!
I don't know what direction these cutscenes were supposed to be going in. I mean, it's not the most serious of games out there, but the more of these you watch, and there's 2 games full of bad voice acting, Zelda's Adventure isn't too bad, the more you start to wonder if this was a deliberate artistic decision.
You've killed me!
Good. Good.
The development budget wasn't that big, oh gee do you think? But to pump out something like this and to be proud of it, the walls of reality start crumbling away. God, imagine if this was Nintendo's work. Imagine what Zelda would look like today. Weirdly, when the Zelda CDI games were released, they were met with quite a lot of praise. People were impressed with the sound design, and one publication described the cutscenes as breathtaking. Clearly standard shift over time, but that far? Does that mean that in 20 years we're going to be looking back at the voice acting and cutscenes in The Last of Us and laughing our faces off? It's a dystopian future, alright. Horror games are a tricky business. You can break down what people find scary and prey on their fear of the unknown to perfectly craft scenarios that raise tension in just the right way to constantly keep the player on the edge of their seat. Or you can just throw in a couple of jump scares and get people to scream obnoxiously to help promote your game. It's almost a losing battle. Shorter attention spans means that fewer people are going to have the concentration to... Hey look, it's a butterfly. Hold on, I'm going to go look at this butterfly. Holy shit, it's a butterfly! Generally, you want to make the player feel uncomfortable in a horror game, and one of the very best of the genre, the first Resident Evil game, managed this in a particularly infamous way. So a combination of the Resident Evil games being made in Japan and 1996 still being kind of early in the history of putting voice acting in video games, led to one of the most intelligent horror games ever made coming across as a little less so. What you might not know is, this is actually brilliant, intentional or not. When you hear lines like,
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you. That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
All you can think while listening to these friendly humans is, no one talks like this. The awkward translation from Japanese to this fractured English not only gave us these completely bizarre lines, but it also turned this clearly very creepy game into a more unsettling one. To such an extent that when subsequent remakes updated the cutscenes and improved the voice acting, a bit of the magic was lost. Weird thing to miss, really. You play some games for a particular reason. You play modern Call of Duty games because you got low standards. You play Sonic because you pine for a better future. You play Battletoads because your idea of sexual excitement is slamming your penis in a car door. But why would you play Mega Man? For the epic story, of course. It's the reason why no one likes the classic Mega Man games. All this jumping and shooting is fine, but what we really need is an intricately woven story to tie this all together. For real though, Mega Man games for the longest time were perfectly capable of standing on their own without a complicated story. Kinda reminds me of Mario actually. As soon as you start thinking harder about what kind of narrative you want in your arcade-style video game, you're shifting focus to something that shouldn't matter as much. Even worse, you're setting up a situation where you can half-ass the shit out of it. As it is now, I'm currently in a position where I've got a choice of 3 Mega Man games when considering bad voice acting. Not encouraging. Between Mega Man 8, X4 and X7, you've got 3 games that are gloriously entertaining in all the wrong ways. Which is interesting because as games, Mega Man 8 and X4 are alright. The bad voice acting is this quirky, poorly emoted cherry on top. Mega Man X7 is... It's messy in a lot of places, but nowhere is this felt harder than when the characters open their mouths. All 3 of these games were voiced by English-speaking voice actors living in Japan, which smacks of convenience over quality, but at least in 8 and X4 they were butchering decent scripts. Mega Man X7 manages to combine uninterested voices that don't fit the characters with a script that sounds like someone put it in a blender and assembled something from the remains. With such gems like...
Take this! Look at me! Look at me! I'm king of the mountain!
Really, if you can stomach the rest of the game, you can get a decent amount of fun out of listening to this acting. Though, word of warning, make sure you throw the game into the nearest incinerator before you reach the lava factory. Otherwise you'll stumble across Mega Man X7's most infamous character that I'm kind enough to shield you from. What the hey? So in order to have some kind of confidence in what I'm talking about in these videos, I spend a decent amount of time each week looking through Wikipedia articles and talking to other people about certain parts of games. It was pretty fun this week. Effectively had to watch YouTube videos that have compiled some of the funniest bits of voice acting and based this list on how hard I laughed.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
This distracts me from the pain that I suffer on a daily basis. And you know, it was fun. I got a good reminder of how hard voice acting really is and how easy it is to sound like you'd rather be anywhere instead of in a recording booth. But, ladies and gentlemen, no game in the last week has made me laugh quite as much as Chaos Wars. There have been comedy games before and games that are specifically designed to make a player explode in a fit of laughing, but I think the obscure Chaos Wars has to take some kind of award for the most unintentionally funny game of them all. The obscurity is pretty important actually, because supposedly the casting department did such a crap job since they were required to have an English dub by Sony, but knew that the vast majority of the people who wanted to play this game would be using the original Japanese voices. The end result, thankfully, is this glorious monstrosity.
But how do I get back to Tokyo?
I do feel slightly bad. I'm even considering apologizing.
And yet it goes deeper. Looking through the credits show that the same last names are attributed to the publishing team and the voice actors, leading many to believe that they simply got their family members to voice these characters. Apparently the localization director drafted in his teenage kids to voice 2 of the characters and his wife and brother to work on scripting. There's the cheap way and then there's the lazy way. Everyone has their favourite and it really depends on what you want the most in shitty voice acting. My favourite has to be Karen.
Stop it, Nicole. I can't move. Is anyone there?
Not sure if the voice actress is drunk or on heavy medication or maybe both, but as everyone around her overacts,
Yeah!
Karen just doesn't give a shit. Almost admirable in a way. This has been RabbidLuigi, and I think what we can take away from Chaos Wars is that any work, not just voicing characters in a video game, any work requires passion. While we can look at these voice acting talents and laugh at how unmotivated they are, it just goes to show what drive can do to something. Make a stand. Have more fun. Got a topic that you'd like me to discuss in a countdown? Leave a suggestion in a comment below and head over to my Twitter, where I'll be holding a vote to decide the subject of the next countdown based off the best of your submissions. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that. Bit of a shorter week this time since I turned 21 on Tuesday, and given the choice, I'd rather not work too hard on my birthday. Just meant that I had to do more later in the week. You can always get it back. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and want to hear more of my voice in a tutorial-y setting, consider donating to my Patreon, where this week I put out a video explaining how I record video game footage and sometimes turn it into a Let's Play. I'm sure you can get something out of that. And if you can't, you know, good for you. I think they're good videos, and so does my mother. She's a nice lady.